Chris Burns, and welcome to The Network. Hard talk with a matrix of newsmakers. The headlines. Europe's economy faces a lot of wild cards in 2016. Among them, how much will terrorism and the fear of it scare away shoppers, tourists, and culture fans? Will the migrants streaming into Europe be a boost to the economy or a drag on it? Some countries like Germany need the extra labor force as theirs shrink. More bailouts ahead for Greece and other countries struggling from the crisis. What could the ECB do if U.S. interest rates rise again to prevent inflation there? Fuel prices could shoot up from Mideast tensions and as Ukraine simmers. And China is slowing down, all factors that could impact Europe's economy in 2016. Now, wired into this edition of The Network here at the European Parliament in Brussels, Roberto Gualtieri, who chairs the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee and is a member of the Socialists and Democrats, or S&D, here at the Parliament. Esther de Lange, Vice Chair of the European Parliament and member of the Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee and a member of the EPP group here in the Parliament. And Guntram Wolf, Director of Bruegel, a Brussels-based economic think tank. Question to all of you, starting with Roberto. Analysts are expecting EU growth to be 1.5% this year, with exports bolstered by a weaker euro. But doesn't that make the EU more vulnerable in that sense?
Clearly, the EU economy cannot be based only on an export drive. We have to build a stronger capacity to boost our demand and our investment.
So how do you do that?
We need both a supply side and demand side policies. And investment is the link between supply and demand. So we need more investment.
Okay, so 1.5%, or the European Commission is saying 2% in its most recent report?
We can fight about 1.5 or 2. The issue is, do we have our own house in order? And yes, the investment gap, if I look at the US, for example, compared to Europe, that is an issue. But I always add, from the side of the European People's Party, if that means investment based on more public debt, it's not the way we want to go. We know we need responsible governments as well. So investment, yes, but once it's growth enhancing and it's also private, and that's what we need to stimulate.
Well, Guntram, let's add into the mix the Juncker plan for investment, 315 billion euros that it hopes to stimulate. Do you think that will lift the EU economy?
No, I think the Juncker plan has a pretty marginal effect on the recovery and on investment. I mean, what is really needed is, of course, stability outside, and China is the big worry here. And, of course, internal supply side and demand side measures. And I think the demand side is actually also quite important. And there is the public role. Public sector has to play a role there.
Okay, let's talk about another wild card. What about the terrorist attacks that seem to scare a lot of people away from shopping, from going to concerts, from tourists even? How much of an impact do you see there, Roberto, or should we be worried about that?
Of course, it's worrying. It has an impact. It requires Europe to be able to run a serious foreign policy at its border. And I don't think a continent that wants to have a role in the geopolitical affairs can do that with the surplus. You need to devote resources and also political capacity to be united. The history tells that.
Right. Esther, how do you see that?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think there's a big divide here between the big political groups. What we demand from the member states of the European Union is unity, actually, in this regard. If I sum up the feeling at the beginning of 2016, it's insecurity, not only in economic terms, but also if you look at the migrant crisis. We need to fix this together, and what we see now is division.
Guntram, do you think that terrorism is going to hurt the economy?
Well, look, I think the experience of past terrorism attacks is that terrorism typically has a very short-lived effect, direct effect. But then there is the more costly affair, which is the public response, which is usually the wars. The wars is the most expensive issue. And of course, that would be the big bill. If Europe was to decide to really enter a war, that would be very expensive.
Okay, let's go to yet another wild card is oil prices. Now, they're very low right now, but they could come back up if tensions increase in the Middle East, if conflicts break out further. Roberto, how should the EU be dealing with this wild card?
Actually, the current tensions in the Middle East, I think, for instance, between Saudi Arabia and Iran, are among the factors who are keeping low the price of oil. This is not necessarily a negative thing. For consumer is a positive additional income effect, but of course it contributes to keep the general level of price very low, and that requires the continuation of the quantitative easing by the ECB.
How does the EU prepare for perhaps another spike in oil prices?
Well, what is important is to get our own house in order. And I'm very happy that Roberto, also from his group, stressed the need for structural reforms. Because this quantitative easing policy of the ECB, it can only be the oil that makes the machine go smoother. But we need to make sure that this machine is structurally sound. And if we don't reform now, with these oil prices being low, then when?
Well, that's a good point. Guntram, how much faith do you have in these policymakers pulling off some kind of tougher reform?
Well, look, to be honest, the experience is not very good in the last couple of years. We've had a lot of things ongoing, but many things are unsettled. I mean, let's start with the banking system. I mean, we continue to have problems popping up in the banking system. QE is working, but is certainly not enough. So on the structural side, yes, we do see reforms in some countries, but in others we don't. So I think overall on the policy side, we are only half delivering.
Okay, now on reforms, we have yet to see if Greece is really going to be able to pull off all the reforms it's required to get the bailouts it needs, and there could be another bailout up ahead. Roberto, what do you think?
Yeah, before that, I want to say I'm happy. Esther is happy. I say we need structural reform. I would be happy if Esther would recognize we need more investment and also demand-side policies. That would be really, really, really happy. I don't think we need another bailout in Greece. I think the plan will work, and we avoided a major crisis. This is a good thing for Europe.
Guntram, will there be another bailout for Greece? What do you think?
Well, look, I think the Greek problem is not solved. I mean, that's very clear. I mean, the program relies too much on austerity. We want too much austerity in Greece. I mean, it's totally unthinkable to get 3.5% primary surplus in Greece. So there will have to be an adjustment, and that will probably mean some debt forgiveness in some form or another, and that will have to come, I think, this year.
Esther, could there be other countries in danger of getting a bailout?
Well, experience has shown that, countries might always be in danger, and we need to be awake. And what I'm a bit afraid of is that when the crisis hit, we were all awake and we were all working very hard to prevent the next crisis from happening. But you can see that for some, attention is going away and we might be taking things too easily. Greece really went this close to the abyss, and we should realize that and make sure that we keep permanent attention not only to Greece but to some other member states in the EU as well.
Let me shift very quickly to the migrant crisis, this influx. There's some who say that's going to be a boon to the economy, and others say that that's going to be a drag at the beginning anyway because of the additional social costs and training them to be able to work. Roberto, how do you see this?
In the long term, taking into account our demographic balance is a positive effect, sure. But of course, we cannot deal to this as a purely economic element. There is a human factor, is political consequences, social consequences. So these require an enhanced capacity for integration, for having a common policy of migration, of border control. So it requires more Europe. And of course, it requires more growth.
Okay, exactly. As Esther, what impact do you see? Could this be a drag on? We see the German economy, at least the German government, really tested by this issue, and that could be an effect on their economy. What
we need right now is a European common answer to this challenge. Some member states might need some kind of influx of workers, but this might not be the people that are coming now. The people that are coming now are fleeing war, and what we need to do is to make sure that we can shift very quickly those in need of protection, which is our obligation to do, and those who cannot stay. And we are failing in making that shift quickly, and we need to get that in order.
Guntram, you think Europe is going to be able to handle this migrant crisis economically this year? Last word.
Well, I mean, economically, the costs are not very high in the short term. The public finance cost, it gives a short-term boost because you spend more, and the long term, it certainly can have positive effects if the migrants really get integrated. But, I'm much more worried that, of course, we need a European answer to this, but I don't think we're really getting it. And so I'm quite afraid that border controls will become much more important, much more salient this year.
Guntram, thank you very much. That's all the time we've got for now. I'd like to thank our guests, Roberto Gualtieri, Esther de Lange, and Guntram Wolff. I'm Chris Burns, and until next time, thanks for connecting with the network.